The Phantom Packet. The engineers at Bolt, Beranek, and Newman were running a routine packet analysis on a Tuesday morning in November 1978 when the monitoring system logged something that made the senior technician stop his coffee halfway to his mouth and set it down very carefully on the desk. A data packet had arrived at the node. It had a valid header. It had a valid checksum. It had routing information that indicated it had traveled through 3 verified network hops before arrival. Every technical marker said this packet was real, was legitimate, and had originated from somewhere inside the network. There was no sender address, not a corrupted address, not a null address. The field where an origin should have existed contained a value that the protocol architecture of 1978 had not defined and could not have generated through any known process. The packet contained 14 bytes of payload. The payload was not random noise. A frequency analysis conducted by BBN researcher David Walden, documented in an internal memo dated November 19, 1978, and referenced in a 2009 retrospective on early ARPANET anomalies, published in the IEEE Annals of the History of Computing, showed the 14 bytes contained a non-random pattern with a periodicity of exactly 7, meaning every 7th byte bore a mathematical relationship to the one before it that could not have occurred by chance. Walden estimated the probability of this pattern emerging from corrupted data at less than 1 in 400 million. The memo was circulated to 6 senior engineers. 3 responded. None proposed an explanation. One response, a single line from a researcher whose name was redacted in the version that survived, said only, "Check whether it came before the log shows it arrived." The timestamp investigation that followed found something Walden's memo described as a clerical impossibility and did not attempt to explain further. The memo was filed under network irregularities, a category that BBN's internal archive did not index for external review. No follow-up investigation was formally initiated. The ARPANET had 111 nodes in 1978. Each one was monitored. The packet came from none of them. It arrived once, carried its pattern of 7s through a protocol that shouldn't have allowed its existence, and disappeared into a filing category designed for things that didn't fit. That is not the behavior of people who thought it was a glitch. Tomorrow's directory. A librarian at the University of Helsinki named Pirjo Mäkinen was cataloging early web directories in the spring of 1996 as part of a digitization grant project when she found a subdirectory inside a publicly accessible FTP server that her cataloging software flagged as anomalous before she had read a single entry. The directory contained 441 file listings. Each listing had a file name, a file size, a creation timestamp, and a short text description. The timestamps on 308 of the 441 files were dated between March and September 1997. The server they were hosted on had a verified creation date of January 1996. The files themselves were not accessible. Every link returned a 404. But the directory listing them existed, was readable, and was cached by at least 2 early web archiving bots before anyone thought to question it. Mäkinen submitted a report to the university's computing department, documented in a 1997 internal IT review, obtained and partially published by Finnish internet historian Antti Leppänen in a 2014 monograph on early Nordic web infrastructure. A computing department analyst named Kari Virtanen examined the server logs and confirmed the directory had been crawled by external bots on 4 separate occasions before its discovery. The timestamps were not a formatting error. The server's clock had been independently verified. The 308 future-dated files had descriptions written in English, Finnish, and one entry in a language Virtanen described in his notes as resembling no alphabet in his reference materials. That entry was 3 lines long. It was not translated. Lepänen's monograph reproduces it in photograph form without commentary. The directory was taken down within 48 hours of Mäkinen's report. The university issued a statement attributing the anomaly to a clock synchronization error. Lepänen's 2014 monograph notes that this explanation requires the server clock to have been running 14 months ahead, while simultaneously logging all other activity at the correct time. No one from the computing department responded to Lepänen's request for clarification. Virtanen had retired by the time the monograph was published. A directory that listed files from a future it apparently knew about was explained with a mechanism that doesn't explain it, by people who stopped talking the moment someone asked the right question. The files it listed never appeared. Maybe they weren't created yet. Maybe they were created and someone made sure they weren't. The dead girl's name. In the weeks following the September 11th attacks, network traffic monitoring across major IRC servers was operating at elevated sensitivity when a systems administrator at EFNet, named only as Callahan in the incident documentation, logged a bot account that had joined 17 channels simultaneously at 3:44 a.m. Eastern on October 3, 2001, and transmitted a single identical message to each before disconnecting. The message was 23 words. It did not reference the attacks. It contained no keyword flags that post-9/11 monitoring protocols were designed to catch. What it contained was a first name, a school name, a city, and a date, presented in the syntax of an ordinary sentence about an ordinary thing. Callahan flagged it not for its content, but for the account's behavior. The simultaneous 17-channel join and instant disconnect was a pattern his monitoring system had never logged before in 4 years of operation. A network security researcher at Georgia Tech named Dr. Marcus Webb, whose analysis was submitted to the CERT Coordination Center in November 2001 and partially declassified in a 2016 FOIA response obtained by security journalist Brian Krebs, traced the account's originating IP through 3 anonymizing proxies to a terminal at a public library in Akron, Ohio. The library's records showed no patron had used that terminal at 3:44 a.m. The library was closed. Webb confirmed the terminal had been remotely accessed. The name in the 23-word message matched a child from Akron who had died in 1987. The school named in the message was real. The date in the message was the date of that child's death. Webb recommended a full investigation. CERT's response, documented in a single line in the 2016 FOIA release, noted the matter had been referred to a relevant federal authority. No case number was ever made public. The IRC logs containing the original message were overwritten during routine maintenance 6 weeks after the incident. Callahan's monitoring report exists only because Webb quoted it in his CERT submission. A signal that used a dead child's name, sent from a closed building through 3 layers of anonymization to 17 channels at once, was referred to someone and then quietly overwritten. The child had been dead for 14 years. Whoever sent that message knew her name, her school, her city, and the day she died. The only question no document answers is how. Coordinates inside. A security researcher using the handle nullroute posted a 4,000-word technical analysis to a now-defunct cryptography forum in August 2013, describing a Tor hidden service that had appeared in a dark web index for 11 days before vanishing, leaving behind nothing except the analysis nullroute had already completed and a single cached page that 3 independent researchers confirmed seeing before the service disappeared. The hidden service contained 1 page. The page contained GPS coordinates. There were 847 sets of coordinates, each accompanied by a 3-digit number and a timestamp ranging from 1993 to 2013. Nullroute mapped all 847 coordinate sets. Every single one resolved to a location inside a building, not outside, not at a street address. Inside. Specific rooms. The 3-digit numbers corresponded to dates in a non-standard but internally consistent calendar system. The most recent entry had been added 4 days before the service appeared in the index. Nullroute's analysis was reviewed by Dr. Sarah Chen at Carnegie Mellon's SciLab and an anonymous contributor known as Ferret. Chen's review, archived by a third party and referenced in a 2015 paper on dark web anomalies published in the journal Computers and Security, confirmed Nullroute's coordinate methodology was sound. Ferret's review added 1 observation that neither Nullroute nor Chen addressed. 12 of the 847 coordinates resolved to locations inside buildings that had not been constructed at the date recorded beside them. The buildings were built later. The coordinates described rooms in buildings that didn't exist yet. The forum was taken down 3 weeks after Nullroute's post. The administrator, who had run it for 6 years, posted a single message saying the forum was closing for personal reasons and did not respond to any subsequent contact. Chen's 2015 paper references the case in a footnote and describes the 12 future building coordinates as a data anomaly requiring further investigation. No further investigation is documented. Coordinates that located specific rooms inside buildings, including buildings not yet built, appeared once in a service that existed for 11 days, were documented by careful researchers, and were then swallowed by a cascade of closures and unreturned messages. 11 days, as if whatever posted them had calculated exactly how long it needed. The Grieving Frequency. A radio hobbyist named Elena Vasquez in Valladolid, Spain, was scanning shortwave frequencies on a December night in 1997 when she found a transmission on 9.277 MHz that she recorded for 41 minutes before it stopped, and described in her log as the saddest thing she had ever heard without understanding a single word of it. The transmission was voice, a single speaker, no music, no signal identification, no station call. The language was unidentified. Vasquez submitted the recording to 3 linguists. None identified the language. One, a professor at the Complutense University of Madrid, whose correspondence with Vasquez was donated to a Spanish radio archive in 2008 and examined by researcher Carlos Domingo in a 2019 paper on unidentified shortwave transmissions, wrote that the phonemic inventory did not match any documented language family he could identify, and that its prosodic patterns were consistent with someone recounting a personal loss rather than reading prepared text. He could not explain why he was certain of that. He simply was. A frequency analysis by a technical volunteer at the Spanish National Radio Communication Agency found no station operating on 9.277 MHz during the transmission window. The frequency was unallocated. The signal strength indicated a transmitter powerful enough to require a licensed installation. No licensed installation existed on that frequency. The agency's analysis concluded it could not determine the origin and closed the inquiry. Domingo's 2019 paper notes the recording's audio quality is perfect. No static, no drift, no interference, which he describes as technically inconsistent with an unlicensed long-range shortwave transmission. 41 minutes of a voice speaking words no linguist has identified, in tones every listener describes as unmistakably grief, on a frequency no station owned, from a transmitter no one has located. It happened once. Vasquez kept the tape for 22 years. She said in her only interview on the subject that she never re-listened to it after the first night. Not because she found it frightening, because she felt, she said, that whoever was speaking deserved the privacy of being heard only once. The impossible email. A systems administrator at a mid-sized logistics firm in Rotterdam named Jan Hoekstra documented in his incident log for March 14, 2004, that he had received an internal company email routed through the firm's own mail server, addressed to him personally, using his correct employee ID, from a server designation that did not exist in the company's infrastructure and had never existed in any configuration document he could locate. The email contained 3 paragraphs. The first described, in accurate technical detail, a network vulnerability Hoekstra had identified 2 days earlier and had not yet reported to anyone. The second described the correct remediation steps in the exact order Hoekstra had been planning to implement them, an order he had worked out himself and written in a personal notebook that had not left his desk. The third paragraph contained a sentence Hoekstra described in his incident log as making him feel physically cold when he read it. He did not reproduce the sentence in the documentation. He wrote only that it was personal, accurate, and could not have been known. The incident was reviewed by IT security consultant Peter Vandenberg, whose assessment was included in a company security audit submitted to the firm's insurers in 2004 and obtained in redacted form by Dutch technology journalist Wouter Smit for a 2018 article published in the Dutch IT magazine Computable. Vandenberg confirmed the sending server designation was not a spoofed external address. It was formatted as a genuine internal server address, routed through the firm's own infrastructure, and logged as an internal transmission by every layer of the mail system. He described this as technically impossible given the firm's network architecture. He offered no alternative explanation. Hoekstra deleted the email on the day of receipt. He told Vandenberg he had done so because he did not want to read the third paragraph again. He retired from IT work the following year. The firm's management signed off on the remediation steps the email had described and marked the matter closed. The vulnerability got fixed. The question of what fixed it was filed under Resolved. The Prophetic Post. A Reddit administrator conducting a database audit in February 2009 found a post in the site's back end that had no associated user account, no subreddit assignment, no vote count, no creation timestamp, and had never appeared on any page of the site accessible to any user. And yet it existed in the database with a valid post ID slotting sequentially between two legitimate posts created on February 11, 2009. The post contained text. The text was a list of 61 items. Each item was a URL. Each URL pointed to a Reddit thread that, at the time of the audit, did not exist. The administrator, whose account used the handle dbaudit09, and who described the discovery in a post to an internal staff forum, later published by technology blogger Jason Scott in his archive.org collection, noted that he had clicked 3 of the URLs at random. All 3 returned 404 errors. He ran a creation log query. The post had no creation event in the log. It had simply appeared in the database between 2 posts that did, as if it had always been there, and the database had decided to acknowledge it. The Reddit infrastructure team's review, referenced in a 2014 retrospective on early Reddit technical history, published in ACMQ by engineer Jeremy Edberg, could not identify a mechanism by which a post could enter the database without a creation event. Edberg's retrospective describes it in 2 sentences and calls it an unresolved database anomaly. Scott's publication of the leaked staff forum post is more detailed. The administrator wrote that over the following 3 months, he had periodically checked the 61 URLs. By May 2009, 9 of them returned active Reddit threads, threads created in the ordinary way by ordinary users after the post listing them had already existed in the database. A post that listed 61 threads that didn't exist yet, had no creator, no timestamp, no mechanism of entry, appeared once and quietly watched as 9 of its predictions came true. The remaining 52 URLs were never documented as resolving. The post was deleted during a database cleanup in late 2009. Whatever cataloged those threads did so before they existed and left no signature except a list. The Fractal Traffic, a network analyst at a Tier 1 internet backbone provider whose identity is protected under an NDA, described in a submission to the Unix Security Conference in 2018, presented anonymously and archived in the conference proceedings under Researcher A traffic anomaly observed on a backbone segment handling approximately 40 terabytes of daily throughput that had no precedent in 11 years of infrastructure work. For 22 seconds on September 7, 2017, a pattern emerged in the backbone traffic that deep packet inspection tools flagged as non-application layer data. Not HTTP, not DNS, not any recognized protocol, moving in a structured formation through the traffic stream. It occupied less than 0.003% of traffic volume during those 22 seconds. But its structure, which Researcher A spent 4 months analyzing before submitting to Unix, was not random and matched no documented protocol or encoding standard. The pattern had a recursive property. Each segment contained, in miniature, the statistical signature of the whole, like a fractal, moving through a backbone carrying the ordinary internet traffic of a September afternoon. Dr. Vern Paxson at UC Berkeley, one of the foremost authorities on internet traffic analysis, provided commentary on the Unix submission included in the conference proceedings. Paxson confirmed the anomaly was real, confirmed the non-protocol characterization, and noted that the recursive statistical property was inconsistent with any naturally occurring traffic artifact he had encountered in 20 years of network research. His commentary recommended further study. The backbone provider declined to make the raw traffic data available for independent analysis, citing proprietary infrastructure concerns. The The 22 seconds exist only in researcher A's analysis. Something moved through 40 terabytes of ordinary internet traffic for 22 seconds in a pattern that a Berkeley professor could not explain, that structured itself the way living things structure themselves, the part containing the whole. It used the internet the way water uses a pipe, not because it was built for the pipe, because the pipe was there. Then, the afternoon traffic resumed as if nothing had passed through it. The Null Voice. A broadcast engineer named Thomas Reiter at a Munich radio station was monitoring an automated overnight transmission on October 19, 2011, during a scheduled 90-minute silent period. A null broadcast, a carrier wave with no content, when the monitoring board showed audio content on a channel the automation system confirmed was transmitting silence. Reiter put on headphones. A voice was present, speaking German, speaking clearly, with no distortion, no interference, no background noise. The voice was giving what Reiter described in his incident report as instructions, though he could not determine instructions for what. The content was specific: numbers, directional terms, references to intervals of time. Without context, it assembled into nothing he could interpret. He recorded 23 minutes before the voice stopped mid-sentence, and the monitoring board returned to confirming silence. The automation system's logs showed 90 uninterrupted minutes of null broadcast. The audio Reiter recorded had, according to every piece of monitoring equipment in the room, not occurred. Reiter's incident report was submitted to the Bayerische Landeszentrale für Neue Medien and examined by a technical assessor, whose review was summarized in a 2012 regulatory internal memo obtained by German media researcher Dr. Klaus Fromm for a 2020 paper on broadcast anomalies published in the journal Media, Culture, and Society. The assessor confirmed Reiter's recording equipment was functioning correctly. He also confirmed that no technical mechanism in the station's infrastructure could have produced audio on a null broadcast without triggering content detection. The assessor's summary concluded, the audio content Mr. Reiter recorded does not have an identified source. Reiter kept the 23-minute recording. He played it once to a colleague who spoke fluent German. The colleague listened, said nothing for a long time, and then said, "It sounds like someone who already knows what's going to happen, telling someone who doesn't how to survive it." Reiter donated the recording to Fromm's research archive in 2019. Fromm has not published its contents. He wrote in his 2020 paper that the decision about whether to publish was more complicated than a question of academic methodology. The Unborn Index. A cybersecurity researcher named Dr. Alinta Watson at the Australian Signals Directorate's Academic Liaison Program was conducting a routine DNS anomaly sweep in March 2022 when her monitoring system returned a result she described in her internal report. Portions declassified in response to an Australian Senate inquiry in late 2023, as the single most technically inexplicable event she had encountered in 14 years of infrastructure research. A DNS record had appeared in the global domain name system for a domain that had not been registered, had no registrar record, had no associated IP address, and yet was returning valid, consistent lookup responses from multiple independent DNS resolvers across 3 continents simultaneously. The domain name itself was a string of characters that Watson's report described as conforming to no naming convention she recognized, and resolving, through every translation framework her team attempted, to no language and no encoding standard. The DNS record existed, verifiably, reproducibly, for 31 hours. The record's TTL, its time to live value, was set to 9,999,999 seconds, approximately 115 days, as if whatever had created it intended it to persist in cached form long after the record itself disappeared. Watson's team ran 847 independent lookup queries from 23 global locations during the 31-hour window. Every query returned the same result. A DNS forensic specialist at ICANN, whose review was referenced in Watson's declassified report, confirmed the record had no creation event in any registry log. It had not been registered. It had not been configured. It had appeared in the infrastructure the way a word appears in a sentence, as if the sentence required it. At hour 31, the record stopped resolving. not deleted. Deletion leaves a log entry. It simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only the cached copies its 115-day TTL had seeded across routers worldwide. Those copies expired one by one. The last confirmed cache expiry was logged on June 14, 2022. After that date, no record of the domain's existence remained in any active system anywhere on the internet. Only in Watson's report. Only in the Senate inquiry. Only in the fact that you are reading this now. And here is the question this entire script has been building toward. Not about DNS records or shortwave frequencies or packets shaped like fractals. Every anomaly in this script was documented by someone careful enough to notice it and credible enough that their record survived. And in every case, the documentation was the only thing that survived. The signal disappeared, the server vanished, the record stopped resolving. What remains is always the description of the thing, never the thing itself, which means we are left asking not what these signals were, but what kind of intelligence leaves only its description behind and takes everything else with it. What kind of presence communicates precisely once, to exactly the right person, in a form that cannot be reconstructed, and whether the fact that we keep finding these descriptions, scattered across 70 years of digital infrastructure, in archives and incident logs and declassified reports, is itself the message. The signal was never the anomaly. We were. And something has been watching us figure that out.